Good evening, everybody. Scott Stevens with you on a Wednesday evening as we look at another perspective. I want to continue what we began discussing on Monday, which was an aspect of disclosure. It has been a fascinating topic that I have participated in, and not so much the disclosure aspect, but the secrets aspect. Secrets, as we all know, even as kids, mom found out you didn't stay there last night, you were over here, or you took that long way from home, or yeah, you did take that cookie out of the cookie jar. Secrets ultimately get revealed. It just is kind of a law of nature, a divine rule that everything ultimately comes to light. And if I'm not mistaken, there's even a little bit of scripture about that secrets get revealed. Everything is revealed in time. And that's kind of the whole function of time, is to let all those little knots we tie get unraveled and get squeezed out of the system. So we'll kind of pick this up today, and there's so many more topics I wanted to get into, but last night, as I was talking with some of the parts of our team at Metadime, we just want to begin to shift this discussion into economics. We've got a book that's coming out, Sink or Swim 2030. It's kind of a survivor's guide, and I know once we get to maybe 2022. 2 years down the road, maybe 3 years down the road, it'll be absolutely worthy of a second edition or a third edition, because things are changing so fast. I'm amazed at even how our relationships with one another have changed. No disease, no encounter we've had in the past has forced us to stay home, to quarantine the healthy. It was always the sick that stayed out of sight, that stayed away, never the healthy. And so that is something that, unless you participated in the Bilderbergs or the Atlantic Council or some of these groups that plan, you would have never known. So we'll start with this and get rolling on this puppy. So disclosure cometh. And if you're familiar with let's just say there are two sides to this, and then there's a whole lot of gray area. There's a side that actually would like to reveal the swamp and drain the swamp, and then there's the other side that wants to just burn it down. Doesn't matter whose it is, what color, we just want to burn it down. So we've got these two teams fighting for the middle ground that both want to reveal the other's dirty work. So as we begin to approach what ultimately, as Kennedy said, would be a revolution, we're going to be really careful about which side we pledge an allegiance to. So here's our connection, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. These are not hot links, obviously, because we got a video, at least for now. And I'll kind of change this from the Monday show. All my life, I've awaited a date, a time for the excitement of disclosure. It's like a kid, finally, Walt Disney World starting. Let's go. Let's get on with the movie. During my younger years, because I was so fascinated with astronomy and sci-fi, I was almost entirely focused on the disclosure of UFOs and aliens. But as my research continued across many other disciplines, and economics was a big part of the one that continued to stick with conspiracy theories. I hear you, Stephen. There's a massive appetite for that out there right now. I mean, utterly massive, because of the situation I just described. We've got two battles going on, and they both want the same thing, and that is a revelation, which is another word for apocalypse. We've had a few movies about that now, haven't we? Thanks for the input, though, Stephen. Okay, so it became clear to me that UFOs are just a single topic, and there still is medicine. How many cures are out there for all, this whole medical dictionary worth of diseases? How many cures have been discovered, stumbled upon, suppressed, used, and not spoken of? What else is on that agenda just with medicine alone? Law. We go to law, or have friends, or have, a lawyer that went to law school, but is that really how we need to behave with each other? Is the precedence of somebody else doing this inside of man-made law, is that really the best way to guide and sculpt how a civilization, how a people interact with each other, how businesses develop relationships with suppliers, with workers, with their customers? Is our law in need of an entire and wholesale alteration, or do we just like demo it and start with something new? History. History is written by the victors. And so history gets a slant. And that is a big part of me that would really like to see both sides of the story. Another aspect of reveal archaeology. Archaeology. What do you do with footprints, human footprints? It looks like a human footprint that's 6 foot long. How can you truly explain the pyramids? There are so many examples. A book, Hidden Archaeology, I probably read 15 plus years ago. It was probably like 25 years ago. Fascinating bits of this and that and man-made tools, thousands, if not tens of thousands of years old. This is not the first time mankind has walked on this planet. That kind of goes in with geology, and there's this whole another resurgence of disaster geology, of how the planet goes through reversals, changes in rotation, that the planet's surface is scrubbed over and over and over again. And what is it about the sun and the relationship with the surface of the planet that sent us scurrying off to the moon, to Mars, to Venus to look for little beads of pure glass? Are they the same? Were they manufactured, or were they created by the sun at the same time? So there's lots of cycles that have happened, and there's geological evidence on all of these, at least inner planets, maybe the moons in the outer solar system. We're going there. We're going there to do that archaeology of these ancient geological events. And then in some ways plays into religion and spirituality. You could separate the two, but once you take on a belief system, in time, it becomes a religion. And there's a lot of, I see, room to grow. And the simplest example is look how we treat each other and the animals and plants on this earth. That simple example, look at ourselves, means that area, our belief system in a deity, must be rewritten. Math, physics, the second law of thermodynamics. We saw on Monday Tesla imploring science to begin to study the invisible. And with that, much of physics, and by default, our understanding of math, will begin to be rewritten. That excites me because potential gets revealed, and that'll play into meteorology, the geoengineering aspect that I came from almost 20 years ago now, where I first got interested in that. If you change the second law of thermodynamics, that means that there are tools, weapons, antenna, frequencies upon which we can look at the natural systems with a different set of eyes. That also excites me. And then there's many, many, many more. As I made up this quick list, I had more. I got to get going. And then they just kept coming at me, that all of these fields, education. Oh my goodness. All right. So I sense that a massive data dump is close. Once this dump arrives, and it might even be a drip, so we can gradually digest it and focus on some of these nuggets for more than just a moment. And then we let the researchers who are truly interested in that topic do the deep dive. So if it's an all at once or a drip, I kind of think a drip would keep us more interested in how it's coming about. But as this dump arrives, many of my earlier shows will have context for assisting us in how we rechange our worldview. And I did these shows in a very deliberate order, so we can go back and kind of look at those beginning at the end of May. But then the question persists: what in your reality will you fight to hold on to versus letting go of gracefully? And I know those folks that I grew up with, I was closest to, the one that they will not want to let go of is religion and spirituality. That will be the one that they will hold on to the tightest. We even looked at time travel and how people can influence time travel. So this Symptoms cartoon aired 15 years ago in 2002. The actual photo was taken just last month of this being almost 3 years ago now. So somebody explain this to me. How is that possible? And one of the data dumps, one of the drips of information we've given, and I talked to you about it in the time traveling show, is Project Looking Glass. How can an artist of a cartoon render a future event with such precision. Well, it wasn't future when that person from The Simpsons, the writer, artist, probably the creators, saw it. And I know that disclosure will reveal so many tools in their arsenal of magic. This other one, what the Chinese are doing to these Spratly Islands, there's a disclosure that has just now begun that will reveal why why they were given permission, and it is a permission thing, to do this to those islands. That is something I want you to watch the news for in the coming week or two. So we find ourselves at a place where we're running this business, we're running these countries, these nations, and it isn't just the United States. The United States is very tied into the British Empire, the city of London, the city of Rome, the Five Eyes for intelligence. But these long held secrets form the basis of numerous business models and the vast sums of money that are siphoned from the citizens to the corporate citizens. Remember, corporations are now citizens, given with all of those inalienable rights: right to speak, right to act, rights in their own person to their own privacy. That needs to change. That's been in place since the 1800s. So this money is siphoned from the citizens to the corporate citizens, with the government and church getting their take along the way. And if it's legal, it has become a part of the game. It is only that which is illegal that would disrupt the flow of money. The last thing you want to do with the cabal is disrupt the money. And so we've come to a place where plunder has become a way of life for a group of men living together in a society. They create for themselves in the course of time a legal system that authorizes it, and then a moral code that glorifies it. And that's why we have the media right now, is to affect that worship of the dollar. So we kind of can all see this. We've recognized this. We've all been in this game long enough, right? We can see that the game isn't fair. And so there's a lot of this wokeness calling out the system. Who's funding the wokeness, or is it just this mob mentality? But what is it that we're calling out? And as I was going through grade school and high school, World War II was only 30 years in the history. It wasn't that far. That wasn't that long ago. But fascism was what Italy was, and Germany. But while the Soviet Union, and it was a Soviet Union at that time, was communist, it was a different economic system, but they, for some reason, seemed to get along just fine. Whereas the rest of Western Europe and then most of North America was capitalist or a free society. So fascism, a political system where the state comes before the individual, which is headed by dictator, bureaucracy, or a republic, which is distinguished by career leaders. And America has its own. We have our own. There's about 5,000 people, maybe not even that. It's a senior administrative services. Look at it. When did it begin? And what is their job? If we're to see a change in an administration, the senior executive service stays, but then the political appointees and the people they bring in to run the Department of Energy, they come on in, run the DOE, but the senior executive service remains intact. They are the continuity inside a changeable democracy, if you will, or even a republic. So we could have this change on the outside, but on the inside, steady as she goes. So what we're looking at is change is needed. We agree with that, but we really must be very careful during civil unrest when emotions get hot as to which side one pledges one's allegiance. Because to condemn the anti-fascists that were rolling through the streets in Germany meant you would be locked up and could imperil your life. But then to condone them, to be on their side during that event, left you being on the wrong side of history once their reign of terror had finally ended. So as Kennedy said, a revolution is coming, a revolution which will be peaceful if we're wise enough, compassionate, if we care enough. And this is the part that I see missing, is that A, it isn't peaceful, And so it means we haven't been using our wisdom and certainly not compassionate. And when you've got such economic disparity out there, when the doors of a Target get broken down, a Walmart looted from, wall to wall in Philadelphia last night, I have this sense that Philadelphia, symbolically being where the Liberty Bell is going to take a brunt of what is coming. Just I don't want to say karmically, but symbolically of what's happening or about to happen in this nation. So Kennedy continues, compassion if we care enough, successful if we're fortunate enough, but a revolution which is coming whether we will it or not. We can affect its character, but we cannot alter its inevitability. So I believe this coming revolution, this is a guided reset. This agenda will force a reveal of the many secrets that have been held so tightly for so very long. We might even get to see the wizard behind the curtain, provided that we, the people, are the ones pulling back the curtain. If we're not the ones pulling back the curtain, they will want to show us who they are, but it will simply be a mask and not the unadulterated truth. So will we have the strength to stay on the up and up with this? All right, we'll finish disclosure here shortly, and we got to get into some solutions. Cures. Remember, we're in an environment where money rules. Money talks. Money makes the world go round. So if we have a cure, again, we're talking about, money. Does that solve the healthcare problem? Does that take money out of the system? Because that's the one thing you're not allowed to do, is mess with the money. This was on Twitter recently. I'm a nurse that was forced to take the flu shot in order to work. All of us nurses got sick. It's been 2 weeks and I've steadily gotten sicker. I had to call in last night. I was running a high fever, no appetite, and the worst headache I cannot get rid of. Don't take the shot. These stories are becoming rather common across our increasingly limited venues for open discussion. Something about this COVID event is playing prelude to one part of this planned reset. Interesting when we look back at flus, or in vaccines in particular, because every time I would go to the doctor, he's like, dude, get the flu shot. Come on, no. I'm like, nope, no. I think I've done it once in the last 10 years, once. Influenza vaccine, military study. So we're largely unbiased and we have a large pool of subjects to draw statistical analysis from. Influenza vaccine, the military study shows 36% higher odds of coronavirus from 2017 to 2018. So examining non-influenza viruses, specifically the odds of both coronavirus and human metapneumonia virus in influenza vaccine individuals were significantly higher when compared to unvaccinated individuals. It's like this vaccination opened the door for this more aggressive COVID-19 virus to take root inside the body. And if you think you're doing the right thing, and I always think of my mom, being a nurse, she has always done the right thing. So she goes and gets her vaccinations. But she's losing her mind. She's losing her ability to function on her own after being in this healthcare system and being obedient for so many years. I don't know whether there's a causation or it's just coincidence, but it doesn't matter because this is who she has become. And it's an impaired individual. So Bill Gates' former doctor says the billionaire refused to vaccinate his children. It's like the guy that owns Pepsi, or at least high on the board, basically not allowing his children to drink the company's products. Makes sense. So paraphrasing this particular military study, the study highlights the value of the human body's ability to fight against viruses. Apparently, by contracting influenza, the body naturally may reduce the risk to non-influenza respiratory viruses. Due to the flu's vaccine interference with the naturally occurring processes, there may be an increased risk of contracting non-influenza viruses. So the assumption is that while influenza vaccines offer protection against influenza, natural influenza infection may reduce the risk of non-influenza Did you get that? Respiratory viruses by providing a temporary, non-specific immunity against these viruses. On the other hand, recently published studies have described the phenomena of vaccine-associated virus interference. That is, vaccinated individuals may be at increased risk for other respiratory viruses because they do not receive the nonspecific immunity associated with natural infections. I think this is what the people that are on the other side of the mask discussion have been saying, that once we take ourselves out of the market, we choose to reduce our exposure to whatever's out there, our body doesn't need to work. And if you've ever been a workoutaholic and then take 3 months off, what kind of shape are you in Monday morning when you're like, oh, I got to get back to work. I got to hit the bench. I got to hit the trail. I gotta. You're winded. You're winded. And this is an interesting chart that I came across today as well. So what we have are the cases. Again, we're testing, it's not a PCR test to ferret out exactly the COVID virus, but just a coronavirus. The common flu is a coronavirus. So we're testing people that would have the regular flu and labeling it coronavirus. There's also a reshuffling of the statistics of people who have died from coronavirus stateside, and that number is about 220,000. When they took out the died with coronavirus or from coronavirus, there was about a third of the number left. So something to think about. So what we have seen is an increase in cases, and that makes the news. It's politically expedient to talk about coronavirus and COVID-19, so that's what the news is focusing on. Whereas the deaths, yes, we had the big peak, and in some ways I want to look at this and say, the virus killed the elderly. We saw the virus rage through healthcare systems, the invalids, the aged. Those took it on the chin. I mean, really, really hard, especially in New York City, where they were co-housed with positive people. And so we saw that huge surge in deaths, and we haven't seen a recurrent surge. So the other virus has to be cancer. And if we're not well, we can't perform to the best of our ability, even close to that capacity. And we have to be weakened for what I'm seeing as the final assault before the reveal happens, or maybe as the reveal happens. If we can't discuss cures, we can't heal ourselves. If doctors can't discuss or aren't even educated on nutrition, then natural cures, we must remain sickly by default. And I think this is where COVID has come in, is that we're already weakened population, that sadly there's so many of us out there that are just kind of on, that's it, Vicky. Cancer is too profitable. Look at this. Cancer industry, probably the most prosperous business in the United States. In 2014, 6 years ago now, there's an estimated 1.66 million new cancer cases diagnosed and almost 600,000 cancer case deaths. It was $6 billion of taxpayer funded cycled through the various federal agencies for research. The NSI, the National Cancer Institute, states that medical costs of cancer care are about $125 billion, with a projected 39% increase to not quite $200 billion by 2020. Well, here we are at 2020, so at least $173 billion. And this is the simple fact, Vic, that the cancer industry employs too many people and produces too much income to allow a cure to be found. This is why we need the reset. The profitability of sick care has to be shown to all, even though we know it. And if we end up with a tumor, you go in, the doctor says, we've got to start chemo right away. You're almost shoehorned into this path. You're drawn into the system. And if you can't afford it, we have a government that will foot the bill. And it's great that can happen. And there are cures. There are cases where people overcome. And just 5 years cancer-free is a success. And sometimes even just one more day is a success. But over the past 100 years, I started looking at different cures for cancer, and they range from everything from diet to resonance. Everything. There's so many ways to deal with this. So many ways. And that's just one ailment out of so many. So what I'm saying is that if we're going to peel back the money that the cabal continues to take out of us, we're going to need that reset. We're going to have to pull the money out of it. And I threw this up there. Insurance policy will hit it again. This is what I have seen money wise, that a little silver, as my personal insurance policy against what's coming. All right, this today, the Dow back at early August lows, crashing almost 1,000 points today. And if you're into charts, if you're into stocks and so forth and so on, a double top means the bull market is mature. We tried to get to the previous highs, couldn't do it. Usually the stock doesn't drop here until bad news happens. Something changed the sentiment. And here we are. We did the drop and we failed once again. So now we're down. S&P, we didn't bust above that ascending line. We couldn't break through that. And so now the path of least resistance is down. If we compare to 1987, we got a little bit of a chart here, but straight ahead is likely a cliff. We're seeing Europe locking down because of COVID. The states and some governors, Idaho being the exception, just this week, they pulled back all COVID restrictions. So citizens of the state of Idaho are free to go about the cabin. So we've got to deal with the money thing. And where we have let this take us is once a nation parts with control of its credit, it doesn't matter who makes the laws. And this was a Rothschild quote from some time ago. The actual quote was attributed to Mayor Amschel Rothschild, is permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes its laws. Makes complete sense. You can strangle the economy of a nation by stepping on the money supply. You can encourage indebtedness with cheap or zero interest rates. Ultimately, who that money has been lent to must pay it back, or they become credit unworthy or default, meaning the lender would lose the investment. And in previous times, the lender would only lend other depositors money. But we've even left that system behind, that sense of responsibility to your shareholders, to your credit union members. You're lending their money out to another member to buy a car, to borrow a house. But we have it to the point where simply what we are doing is creating money out of thin air and then lending it out. So if you default on something that is imaginary in the first place, all you're doing is putting a stain on the ledger. So this is where we used to be. This was exchange. This was lawful money, as was stated by legalese, if you will. So was silver and gold. Silver backed the paper, or gold backed the paper currency, and silver was in circulation in your pocket. So we bring into this lawful money. And ultimately, to kind of wrap this up, or at least bring this back to where we're going with disclosure, is that if we change the monetary system of this country, if we change the need to charge borrowing costs, to charge interest, which there are some religions, some very old religions, where it was illegal to charge usury. And here we are charging it. And that is what is ultimately going to bankrupt the United States, is the inability to even make interest payments. So lawful money is any form of currency issued by the United States Treasury and not the Federal Reserve System, which has been around for 100 plus years. This includes gold and silver coins, treasury notes, treasury bonds. Lawful money stands in contrast to fiat money, which is what you have in your wallet purse right now, in which the government assigns value even though it has no intrinsic value because there's no metal standing behind the fiat money. Fiat means by decree. So fiat money includes legal tender such as paper money, checks, drafts, and banknotes. Lawful money is also known as specie, which also means in actual form. Lawful money is currency issued by the U.S. Treasury, such as gold, silver coins, treasury notes, and bonds. Fiat money is not lawful, but right now is considered legal tender. The difference arises from the Constitution, which specifies gold and silver as the legal form of tender for debts. Hence the varied interpretation, since new forms of payments have come into circulation since 1787. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 gave the Federal Reserve the right to issue Federal Reserve notes, which are backed by the government and redeemed in lawful money, but did not specify what lawful money meant. This becomes and may become a very important distinction. In 1933, Congress amended the Federal Reserve Act to include all U.S. coins and currencies as legal tender to avoid any confusion about what type of money is legally permissible. So, oddly enough, the dollar bills, this is from Investopia, the dollar bills we carry around in our wallets are not considered lawful money. The notation at the bottom of the dollar bill reads, legal tender for all debts, public and private, is issued by the Federal Reserve, but not the Treasury. Remember, the Treasury is the one that is constitutional. The Federal Reserve had to get an amendment to be allowed to operate inside the borders of the United States. Legal tender can be exchanged for an equivalent amount of lawful money. This gets important, but macro effects such as inflation can change the value of fiat money. Lawful money is said to be the most direct form of ownership, but for purposes of practicality, it has little use in direct transactions between parties. I'm going to add the word yet. History of lawful money. So when the Federal Reserve Act of 13 was established the Federal Reserve System, it authorizes it to use these FRNs, these Federal Reserve notes, and it states that these FRNs shall be obligations of the United States and shall be receivable by all national and member banks and Federal Reserve banks for all taxes, customs, and other public dues. They shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury Department of the United States, in the city of Washington, District of Columbia, or at any Federal Reserve Bank. However, the act did not specifically define what the lawful money meant, and since some currencies that can be used by national banking associations as lawful money reserves were not considered legal tender. So where I'm kind of going with this is that the money we may be using, these dollar bills, may not actually be lawful money. They're legal tender, but are they lawful money? And so there's some confusion that stands around this issue, because we're going back to the Constitution once again, that no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts. The founding fathers wanted to make sure that the work you did, you received something with intrinsic value as payment. And the United States, when we did work and we shipped that work, whether it was automobiles, whether it was corn, whether it was wheat, overseas, what we received to settle that balance was gold or silver until 1971. And then Nixon closed that receivables because we had nations, France in particular, that wanted payment in gold. And we were like, no. You can have these, but you can't have our gold. So we're to this point where I'm curious how this reset, this monetary reset that is inevitable simply because when we borrow money, there is an interest due. And when the Federal Reserve System creates $100,000 to go to a portion of a house, then that 30-year note that person, that couple went into debt for to get that Federal Reserve notes to go buy the house, it's going to cost them nearly $300,000 when all is said and done to pay off that $100,000 house. And that's the expensive interest. And that money is not created. That has got to be scoured from outside or from within that system to then pay off that bank, that credit union, the FHA for that. So this is where I see, and that legally system that allowed for or insisted that no usury be charged also had a system of debt jubilees. Every 50 years, debt was wiped away. And once that debt was wiped away, it brought back the life into the economy, because the saddle that you were carrying on this journey of life was suddenly much, much lighter. So lawful money, it is probably worth looking into as we move into this reset. But to completely avoid that discussion, Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, this is the symbol for Ripple here, Bitcoin is an independent monetary, an independent exchange system, free of all governments. And in the last 6 months, there has been, I don't want to say a rush, but let's just say there has been a series and a growing number of companies that have cash on their ledger sheets. And they realize that if we were to go through a banking crisis, that a portion of that available cash in the checking account, in the savings account, simply in the banking system would be at risk for confiscation. We call it a haircut. It happened in Cyprus in 2013. Those depositors with over a certain balance woke up, they went to the ATM, checked their balance, and a percentage was simply gone. And so these companies are investing hundreds of millions of dollars in these digital currency assets. And I sense and have experienced the potential for generational growth to be accumulated prior to this reset. Now, the only reason we need a reset, well, the system's a little old. It was a little corrupt to begin with. And this is what has people disunited right now, a little angry with each other that there is not equal opportunity, whether it's by color, whether it's by economic position beginning, but nevertheless, you would think that regardless of who we are, we should at least be able to approach the system with an equal opportunity. Certainly, the outcomes will never be the same because we are different people, we're individuals, and that individuality needs to be celebrated, not something to be suppressed, not something to be ashamed of who you are. So we can't unite a people that simply will not support each other. And if we're to go through a revolution, that means there's two sides. That means there's anger. That means that there will likely be bloodshed. And in some ways, there already has been. It's just been pretty minor, but we haven't solved the issues yet. So the cure for evil and disorder is more liberty and not suppression. That probably won't happen until we've learned our lesson. That's ultimately what is coming. Holy cow. Good to see you guys over there, Charles. If you're still around, I see your comment, your video description here. You've used the word we twice. We should be will. Probably so. I was banging that out just a few minutes before we started the show. Vicky and Cryptos, I'm with you, girl. That I was so excited when I first read about Bitcoin in 2011. So excited about that opportunity. I had gone down the road of gold and silver, and it just didn't serve me in the way I thought it would through the last financial crisis. It just didn't. And so I made it a rule that in the future, my investments would only be in something that didn't have the hands of government all over it, that they can't create thousands and thousands of paper gold contracts to suppress the price of something upon which the original modern monetary system was based. And then they've taken that from us, and all of a sudden, in the price of gold, a dollar in 1913 is now worth about 0.8 of a cent. So that is the ultimate definition of inflation. All right, so yeah, Steve, I love the conspiracy stories. I really, really do. We will not completely let go of those, but there's going to be a way we weave these things back into finance and how we can recognize what's coming down the road. The next month, I really thought October would have been a little more nerve-wracking than it was, but it ended up to be pretty reasonable, pretty calm. Most of the chaos was kept inside the evening news and on social media, and for me, that is just fine. Let's let the discourse happen there, the discord happen in those locations, so we can keep the power on. All right, guys, have a great night. And yes, celebrate individuality, because we're having a common experience, but all with our different points of view, all with our different gifts and abilities. And it is when we can help one another, we can support one another, that all of this shit, frankly, will have been worth it. So if you're catching this on a replay, do a hashtag replay, and because I can see the numbers climbing over there. So you're coming in towards the latter part of the game. So rewind and start it from the beginning, sit through and leave some comments. And I just want to say that some of the content is being shifted over to BitChute just because. Just because. All right, guys, have a great night. I'll catch you tomorrow, 5 o'clock Mountain, for a little look at the weather. We had Zeta make landfall. You got to love a hurricane. What are we, six letters into the Greek alphabet? Unbelievable. Unbelievable, but I wouldn't expect anything less from 2020, and I can guarantee you this show isn't done. There's a whole nother chapter to yet to go. This year has got a lot to go in the next 60 some odd days. Have a great night, and I'll catch you tomorrow. And in the meantime, please keep looking up.